I'm going to take an email from Percy. Percy says, a saint's canonization is supposedly infallible, correct? What is the source claiming that canonization is infallible? Was it a council? I have an article, Percy. It's presumed infallible, but I don't think it's necessarily. Let me read this to you. This is an article from Zenit, the news service. He says the object of canonization is that the person declared as a saint is now in heaven and can be invoked as an intercessor by all the faithful. We know that. The infallibility of this action is accepted by the majority of Catholic theologians, but has not itself been the subject of a definition. What is theological can be infallible according to the Church's teaching, but the canonization is more of an administrative act based on evidence. Father says, thus, with the act of canonization, the Pope, so to speak, imposes a precept upon the faithful by saying that the universal Church must henceforth keep the memory of the canonized with pious devotion. The 1967, this may answer, you've got several questions here, this may answer some of them. The 1967 New Catholic Encyclopedia discusses the theological foundation for the infallibility of canonization. It says this, quote, the dogma that saints are to be venerated and invoked as set forth in the Profession of Faith of Trent has as its correlative the power to canonize. St. Thomas Aquinas says, quote, honor we show the saints is a certain profession of faith by which we believe in their glory, and it is to be piously believed that even in this judgment, the Church is not able to err. The Pope cannot by solemn definition induce errors concerning the faith and morals into the teaching of the universal Church. Should the Church hold up for universal veneration a man's life and habits that in reality led to his damnation, it would lead the faithful into error. It is now theologically certain that the solemn canonization of a saint is an infallible and irrevocable decision of the Supreme Pontiff. God speaks infallibly through his Church as it demonstrates and exemplifies its universal teaching in a particular person or judges that person's acts to be in accord with its teaching. At the same time, it is important to note that while the decree of heroic virtues and the miracle form a necessary part of the process of canonization, they are not the specific object of the declaration of infallibility. Although the saint is proposed as a model of virtues and Christian living, it is not the specific object of canonization. For example, it is quite possible that a martyr show heroic virtue in the face of death without necessarily having lived all the virtues to an exemplary degree. Nor does canonization make the saints immune from judgment of history insofar as hindsight might show that some of their external actions proved to be unwise or had negative consequences. I'm going to go back, I'm going to stop right here and go back to your question because you posed several. So Percy says first, a saint's canonization is supposedly infallible, correct? Yes. What is the source claiming that canonization is infallible? And we saw that it came from the Council of Trent. Yes. He says, secondly, is the declaration of a person as venerable and blessed also infallible? I'm going to continue reading the article we were on, but I don't know that. I would guess no, because that is in the process. That's why it's a process. If one who is called venerable does not go on to be blessed, because there's something found in the process of the inspection of that person, the history, that would not raise them to the life of blessed, and thus from blessed to canonized. I've been part of a particular foundress of an order. I typed 37 pages of her writing to even be declared a venerable, and it's been approved by the Vatican. That's 37 of hundreds of pages, but we don't know yet that she's a saint. She has not advanced yet to blessed. So this is a process, and of course, I think it's not infallible until canonization takes place. And Percy says, I can find lists of saints in Wikipedia, etc., but is there an official published list from the Catholic Church? Not that I'm aware of that's published. Of course, the dicastery of saints, of the cause of saints, would have a complete list, but I don't know that it's been published. I don't say it hasn't. I don't know that it has been. Percy says, my understanding is that there is a congregation, yes, there is, whose job it is to assist in the beatification process. And before this congregation, the authority fell to the local bishops, yes, to canonize a saint in their diocese. Oh, he's saying before this congregation, the authority fell to the local bishops to canonize a saint in their diocese. I'm not aware of the history. You might be, of course, 100% right. He says, when the congregation took over, did they have all the bishops everywhere sent in their list of saints? I would assume so, but dear Percy, it would take me quite a bit of research to look this up. And that's research, of course, that you can do as well. He says, for example, St. Joachim, the father of Mary, is a canonized saint. But if you try to find out who canonized him, it just says pre-congregation, meaning that we don't know who, when, and where he was canonized. Any sources you can give would be helpful, thanks. Okay, let me go back to the article we're reading and see if it gives us any more information. Although the saint is proposed as a model of virtues and Christian living, it is not the specific object of the canonization. For example, it is quite possible that a martyr, we read this already, I'll repeat it, that a martyr show heroic virtue in the face of death without necessarily having lived all the virtues to an exemplary degree. Nor does canonization make the saints immune from the judgment of history, insofar as hindsight might show that some of their external actions proved to be unwise or had negative consequences. So that doesn't mean that they are ineligible to be saints. Father writes, this argument, therefore, would place the infallibility of canonization within the area of faith, insofar as the venerability of saints is a dogma grounded in revelation, and the determination as to whether persons can be thus venerated is a necessary exercise of infallible authority. Well, again, persons are not venerated until they are indeed canonized, and at that point the Church holds it infallible that they can be venerated. Father says this is sometimes called the secondary object of infallibility. It is not revealed dogma per se, but truths regarding faith and morals, which are not formally revealed, but are so bound up with divine revelation that to deny them would lead us to many difficulties and even lead to a denial of some aspect of revelation itself. According to Ludwig Ott's classical manual of dogmatic theology, and let me just say that Ludwig Ott's, O-T-T, Ott, his work on fundamentals of Catholic dogma was huge book, leaving a huge influence on my coming into the Catholic faith. And it gives the entire theology and dogma of the Church and its level of infallibility and certainty. It's an outstanding volume, Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. And Father says, according to Ludwig Ott's classical manual of dogmatic theology, there are 4 kinds of teaching involved in this exercise of infallibility. This is very important. Theological conclusions derived from formally revealed truths by aid of the natural truth of reason, historical facts on the determination of which the certainty of a truth of revelation depends, so-called dogmatic facts, for example, is Pope so-and-so truly the duly elected and rightful successor to the throne of Peter? There's been a lot of course, discussion on that with our current Holy Father. Thirdly, natural truths of reason, which are intimately connected with revelation, such as the morality of certain medical procedures. And finally, the canonization of saints. And again, look to the book, Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, page 299, if you want that reference. Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. I think, Percy, this would be a wonderful book for you, page 299. And Father says, a further argument can be offered. With a canonization, the Pope mandates rather than permits, as is the case of beatification. He permits beatification, but he mandates that a saint can be venerated in the Church's liturgy, and especially with the Eucharistic celebration in his honor. Considering that the Mass is the highest and most perfect form of worship, it is logical that the Holy Spirit would guard the Pope and the Church from any error regarding a canonized person's definitive state. At the same time, it must be recognized that this is an argument based on congruence and is not apodictic. I'd have to look up that word, apodictic. The institution of a liturgical celebration does not in itself imply an exercise of infallibility. That's the institution of a liturgical celebration, but that's not a saint. A saint who is canonized and worshipped in the Mass is done so infallibly.